start talking yet.
Okay.
Well, let's see, this was in 98, 97, 96, 96, I guess, yeah. Well, I'll just start talking and you can start filming whenever you think you want me to, or to.
That's a good idea.
It was 1996 that they had a contest at Pittsburgh, Kansas for the people from the elderly people from the rest homes and from the cost of living program. There was about 25 or more contestants in this contest. Getting ready for it, Peggy, our recreation director, and we worked up a story, starting out with when I was born in Nowata, Indian Territory in September of 1905, and shortly after my birth, my folks came to Kansas, Toronto, Kansas, where I grew up and went to school. One of my earliest recollections of life is a trip to the meat market with my mother. You folks probably don't know what a meat market was like back in 1906 or 7 or 8, about 1908 when this took place. We went to the end of this building and there was hooks on the back wall with big chunks of meat hanging up there, some side of the beef, side of some pork and stuff. And anyhow, after Mother had made her purchases and paid for them, the butcher reached up here and he pulled down this big bundle of big old wieners, pulled one off and gave it to me. Well, that's the first gift anybody outside the family had ever given me. That was something pretty nice. Well, I started school in 1910. I went clear through school in Toronto. The year I was a senior in high school, we were going to have an entertainment of some kind. I can't tell you what the entertainment was about, but I was appointed onto a committee with a friend of mine, Richard, and a couple of girls that I don't remember their names at all, and a teacher is a sponsor of this committee. She called a meeting for one day after lunch before school assembly, and we met in the classroom, walked down the hall, just into the door and right straight down the aisle, blackboard on one side, seats over here on the other, and we sat in this row of seats. When the bell rang for come to assembly hall to start the classes, Richard was sitting up in front of me and he jumped up and he shoved my face down into the desk. I reached over on the blackboard, picked up one of those old wooden back erasers, and he was headed for the door, and I wham right at him, but he beat that eraser at the door, and he pushed the door shut. This eraser hit down in the lower corner of this opaque window and glass in the door, and cracks, all 3 or 4 cracks up through it. Before the afternoon was over, they had to take that glass out because it was loosened enough, and hung a piece of cardboard on the door. The next day, we had general assembly in the morning, and that was when the whole high school gathered before classes, and teachers and the principal got up and made talks. This morning, the principal made a little talk about when students of the Toronto school broke or destroyed any school property, they made arrangements to replace it. Those who were responsible for the breaking of the glass in the door in room 9 was known and said come to her office, make arrangements to replace it, nothing more would be said. Did anybody go to the office that afternoon about that glass at all? On Sunday evening, Richard and a friend of ours named Warren, Warren's folks had a Chevy car and was sitting at the church across from the schoolhouse, and he took a screwdriver out of this car, and we went over on the backside of the schoolhouse and gained entry into the schoolhouse, and we went upstairs. pried the molding out of this door opening and got it all ready for a glass. Then I went across the hall to the superintendent's office, the principal's office, and molding out that held the glass in place, and carefully tipped that glass out of that opening, carried it across the hall into the classroom door, and put the glass, tacked the tape all around it, and went back, took the cardboard, went over and hung it on the principal's office, and then we went home. Well, Monday morning when we came to school, lo and behold, there's a glass in room 9, but look at the principal's office door, and there's a cardboard hanging on it. What did the principal do about it? She did nothing to the student body or any of the student body. She went to telephone and called and had him come down and put a new glass in her door. That's an example of school life back in 1922. There you are. How do you like that?
I like that story, Greg.
That was good.
Now, is that the story you actually told? Is that the one?
Huh?
Is that the one you told at the competition?
Oh, I haven't finished my story, have I? Let's keep it going then. All right, this was all worked up, and we went to Pittsburgh in the afternoon and appeared before the judges in a room down the basement of the building there, and we all was introduced and interviewed a little bit by the judges and told the story. So we did whatever we were going to do that night. Then they fed us a supper, and they took us up in the auditorium on the platform, and the auditorium under the bright lights and the crowd out there in the dark. They introduced everybody, all the contestants and where they were from, and then they announced so many winners and chosen to represent us in the finals. My name was among those in the finals. I sat there and I listened to all the rest of them. Some of them sang songs, some of them read poetry, some of them had handiwork, some of them, one woman had some quilts, and the man had some work that he had done. And my name was the last called, and when I got up, when they introduced me, I reached out and I took the microphone from the MC, and I started in on an altogether different story. This story was when I was, back in 1930s, I drove trucks for a creamery company and picking up cream station. In the wintertime, we didn't have much cream to haul, and we sold potatoes to the grocery stores. In Howard, Kansas, there was 3 grocery stores. I was selling 2 of them. The other one, I wasn't able to sell him any potatoes. We priced potatoes this way at that time. They sold in 100-pound bags. I'll use these figures as an illustration. $1.30 a bag or $1.25 if you buy 5 or more. This man immediately would say, for 20 bags, I'll give you $1.20 a bag. And I'd go through a song and dance about best being a hired driver salesman. I didn't control the prices that sell those at. I had to get what was wanted for. But one day I got to thinking about that old boy, and I decided I'd try something on him. So when we got around to the place where he told me, asked me the price of potatoes, you know what? Potatoes just went up a nickel a bag. I said, $1.35 a bag, $1.30 for 20 or 5 or more. Immediately he said, I'll give you $1.25 and 20 bags to bring them down to me on Thursday. I went through my song and dance as usual, but finally I said to him, if you want to gamble on not getting these potatoes, I'll write this order and turn it in and see what the boss does about it. I knew he was going to get potatoes, but he didn't. I didn't tell him that. And you know what? Every week when I went in his store and when he asked me the price of potatoes, they'd go up a nickel and he'd offer me a nickel less than that price, which was the price my boss wanted for him. And I sold him 20 bags of potatoes every week the rest of the winter. Now that is the end of the story.
And then what happened?
Huh?
What happened in the competition?
Oh, in the competition?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they started out as so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so, and got down to the final one, and I won the competition.
What'd you win?
Oh, a nice little crown. and some pictures.
And what was your title, Grandpa?
Huh?
What was the title? Your
Well, I was the man of the year, I think is what they called you.
oh, okay, Man of the Year. Let's see that crown on you. Let's see how
Yeah.
good you look.
Yeah.
Put your crown on. That's a neat crown.
High school in 1918, and the World War ended that year in November. But the classes ahead of me, there was about 6 or 8 at the most in the class, and usually only one boy and the rest of them women. So the senior class had to have some help for their senior play. The junior class had to have help for theirs. We put on 2 plays every year, the junior play and the senior play. And after, I don't know about the first year, but after the first year, I appeared in both of those every year. And I enjoyed it. I like to get up in front of people and make a fool of myself.
Well, I always liked that too, Grandpa.
Yeah,
When I was in high school, I did the theater productions.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe it's in the blood, I don't know.
I don't know either. It just may be.
Well, you know how Norma Jean, when she was little, how she performed before the public with her acrobatic dancing until for several years.
Yeah.
She appeared in a lot of amateur shows around.
Well, all your kids danced, right? Didn't Mom and Bill dance too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I tell these people here about her dance program, about her being able to stand on a stand about that high, drop a handkerchief down onto the floor and stand on that stand and do a back bend and pick that handkerchief up in her mouth and raise herself back up to the erect position on that table. You know, she really had a limber back and had good control. She was good at it.
My gosh.
Yeah, she really was good. She could put on a good show. She did. She used to put on a good show. I built a table. The top of the table was 2 feet wide and about 4 feet long, I guess. And I built steps and so fastened the steps with 4 hooks to hold it. And she'd start out down on the stage floor and then do some kind of front overs or something up those steps and do the main part of her program on that table, and then I had this other little table stuff on the other end of it from the way from, and she was up about that high, and then up on the table on top of that when she did that back bend pick on her, and she'd drop that handkerchief onto that table
And pick
stand
it up.
back up there to really give people a good view of her being up near that way.
That's amazing.
And she was real good when she was a kid. Yeah.
Hey, Grandpa, tell me about how you met Grandma.
Well, I don't know. There's no story about her meeting Grandma. I was working in a cafe there in Emporia, and her folks was running a little cafe across the street from her. And she had worked of an evening. She was in high school, and she had worked of an evening, and she'd wait on us fellas at the counter when we eat her supper. We went over there to eat of an evening. That's where I met her, and how I met her. Had a little story about when I was dating her before we were married. We went to picture show there in Emporia one night, and at that time I was rooming upstairs in this building above the theater. Had a room up there. People that owned the building had a big apartment, and they had a couple of bedrooms they rented out. Well, I come out of the theater that evening and was wearing a garter to hold your socks up, and one of them had come undone, and I walking out there, that garter flapping around. I was out here on the sidewalk of Commercial Street after the theater, in the after theater crowd, and I asked her to go around the corner so I could take that garter off, and she wouldn't go around the corner, so I just stopped her right there in the middle of the main drag and I took both garters off and threw them in the gutter, and I've never worn sock garters from that day on. I've never worn them since.
And how'd you ask her to get married then?
Huh?
How did you ask her to get married?
Well, I don't remember that. I really don't. I think I tormented her about getting married several times before she finally consented to.
That's just what I remember too. She turned you down a few times.
Well, she put me off anyhow. Wouldn't give me a definite answer.
And how old were you when you got married?
Well, let's see, we got married in March of 1925, and September of 25, I was 20 years old, so I was halfway between 19 and 20 when I got married.
And Grandma was 15 then.
I think she was 16, yeah.
I think 15 in March, maybe 16 in July.
I believe that was it. I'm not sure, but I think that's right. Yeah, we were just a couple of kids. There was a young woman or two around there that made their brags after we got married. There was one especially, so I have that broke up within a year. But for some reason or other, she and I lived together for better than 71 years.
71. Isn't that something? I think that's a record all by itself, Grandpa.
I was on that creamery route. Fact of the matter, when I quit that route, when we moved to Wichita.
Oh, was that when it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, Bill was about 10 years old when we moved to Wichita. About that, I guess he was. Norma Jean was 8.
So what'd you do before the creamery route for a living?
Well, the first 13 years of our married life, we moved quite a bit, and I worked several different jobs. Yeah, I was working in the creamery in the plant in Emporia when we got married.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I was up there, I went up there and took a job and went to work in that creamery. And they transferred me down to a little plant they had in Coffeyville, and that's where Charlene was born, in Coffeyville. And when she was a little girl, a salesman had come down there trying to promote some business for us. It was mostly ice cream. It was a little ice cream plant's what it was. And he'd go out and rustle up maybe an order of some small grocery store. In those times, there was a lot of little grocery stores.
Yeah.
Pop them up. We put a little wooden packer in there that packed ice cream and ice in them. Maybe it only hold 2 cans of ice cream. And he turned those orders in, and I had to put these orders together and deliver them. And also had my first job in the morning was crush up a bunch of ice and load it in the truck with a bucket of salt, go around and drain the water out of these little ice cream machine boxes, and repack them with more ice and salt to keep their ice cream. And I'd been out I had enough of them scared around over town. It took about 4 hours to make that job.
Mm.
And I would always stop at home and eat lunch because I finished up within a few blocks of home before I went back to work. And I went back to work this one day, and this guy was in there, and he jumped me up a rattling and raving and cussing me out for not delivering an order. I didn't have the order that morning, so I couldn't have delivered. I was doing my job, and he got into abusing me a little bit vocally, and I finally cut loose on him, and I called him a lot of bad names. And we had a club there that was a 2x4 that had been handle rounded off. She packed ice down around in the,
Oh,
see,
okay, yeah.
a 2x4 about that long. And I was just standing there, and I laid my hand over on it, and I told him, I says, you call me that one more time, and I'm gonna knock your goddamn head clear off your shoulders. And I had that club in my hand, and he said something about he was gonna fire me, and I said, you can't fire me, you don't have any authority to. I said, by God, I've already quit, and you just leave me alone. And boy, he shut up, they got him shut up, but I went and changed my clothes and left. Hell,
That was the end of that job.
that was the end of that. I went to work for a little company that sold coffee and tea and odd and ends for washing powder and stuff. Like a Jewel Tea used to operate. You had your list of customers, and you made your delivery of what they'd ordered the last time, and they paid you, and you took their order for next time. It took me 2 weeks, I believe it was, to make my entire route. But times was getting rough, and that was long in the late 20s. And after a year or so of that, I quit that job and come back up into Kansas. And I didn't know what I was going to do. We went back to Emporia, because I went over to the plant over there, and the fellow that was working there, one of them working second shift, and he, what are you doing, Frank? And I said, nothing, well, out of a job right now. And he said, would you like to work a couple of nights? I want a couple of nights off. I said, well, you make arrangement with them in the office, and I'll do it for you. And I worked a little extra there for a while, and first thing you know, I had a job with the same company.
Just got your job back.
Well, different job, actually.
Was it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, actually. I froze ice cream, and they taught me how to run the ice cream freezers and freeze ice cream, and I froze ice cream for a couple of years there. And they enlarged the plant. The man that owned the place was controlling interest in it. Had been managing the plant for Beatrice Foods, and he quit his job at Beatrice and come back to Emporia and took over that plant there, and he built on the place and went into the milk business. In order to have some milk customers, he bought out a couple or three local fellows, farmers that had milk routes here in town, did a little.
Oh,
and
so he was kind of buying them up.
And those guys that he bought out, he guaranteed them a job for a year. Well, there was 3 men that we really didn't need in the wintertime. And somebody had to go, and of course those guys had a contract, and I didn't. I got laid off. That's when let's see. I drove a bus for a while there on the streets of Emporia, and I went to Wichita and looking for a job. And a couple that had one-time worked for Fairmont Creamery, Emporia Creamery, was running what they call a concentrating point there in Wichita. And he needed some help, and he hired me, and Ed and I moved to Wichita. This was in 28 and 9. Norma Jean was born there. Bill had been born while I was working at Emporia. And after about 3 or 4 years, well, at least this couple quit and went somewhere else, and I run the place there for Fairmont then. The creamery companies got together, and they decided to do away with these concentrating points, and they did a little trading, and some of them, I don't know how much business this other company might have kept out of that I had, people shipping their cream in there. I had a mailing list in southwest Kansas and some in western Oklahoma. I had 1 or 2 people that shipped me cream out of eastern New Mexico, even to Wichita.
Really?
But we got a little old cream station down in Chanute, and they transferred me there. And
Did
I
you
run
live in
that for-
Chanute there? I didn't know you lived in Chanute.
Yeah, Normie was just about a year old when we moved to Chanute. I was there about a year, and they had a branch plant in Iowa, and they moved me up there. And eventually I got laid off up there. I went back to Emporia, and I kept buzzing around and getting close to my last time job move. That's when I got that route from Fairmount, picking up cream south out of Emporia where I sold the potatoes.
Okay.
And when I quit, that was 1938. We moved to Wichita. Since then, I held a job there. Well, when I went over there, my cousin had a little neighborhood grocery store, and his health had went bad.
Was that Don?
Huh?
Was that Don?
Yeah, Don Byington,
Yeah.
And I run that store till the war started, and rationing, you couldn't get, and then it had a couple of operations just about a year apart. Doctor and hospital bills took my money, and didn't have enough left to keep that grocery store going. So
Finished up with you were running the grocery store for Don,
I bought the store and run it myself.
but ran out of money.
Yeah, doctor and hospital bills chewed me up. I didn't have the money to continue.
So what'd you do from there?
Well, I guess.
Oh, Peerless.
I went to work for Peerless Food, traveled on the road selling Nuco, and cheese and stuff. And
Oh, was that where you sold those big wheels of
Yeah.
cheese you told me about?
Yeah. This was back during World War II and merchandise. So I quit during that World War II. I put in about 3 or 4 years working for Prudential Insurance Company during World War II.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I sold more insurance that somebody else wrote than I wrote myself. I didn't have that old killer instinct. Insist on getting his name on the dotted line and some money out of his pocket,
Yeah.
a down payment. And, I just didn't have that killer instinct. So after the war, I went back to work for Prudential again. And not Prudential, but Peerless Foods. I worked the rest of Southwest Kansas for about 3 or 4 years. And after the kids all got married and Edna's health wasn't good, I told her I'll find a job and make you and me a living where I can be at home. That's when I went to work for Boeing.
Yeah, they're in Wichita.
There in Wichita. I worked there for 17 years. Of course, we took one trip during that time for Boeing. They had about 14 different air bases in the United States. They had modification programs going on those B-52s. And they had people stationed and working there at those. And after my mother passed away, I felt like we was free to do as we darn pleased go where we wanted to. So I put in for a road trip, and I specified either Merced, California or Spokane, Washington that I'd like to go to. And I got to go to Spokane, Washington. I went up there January 1st of 1963 and stayed until they closed the job down in 1960, in the fall of 64, I guess it was. I was up there just about 2 years, not quite. Back to Wichita, and I finished out my time there till I bought the lumber yard in Toronto. I had built this house in Toronto for retirement. And I don't know whether it was a policy of the company, but it seemed to be in the tool crib department when the employee was reaching retirement age, they started riding him and breaking him back to lower pay. And I think one reason was because when you retired, your retirement was based on your wages that you drew at the time you retired.
Oh, that sounds like some unfair labor practices there, Grandpa.
Well, I think it was probably what they was doing, but then you couldn't prove it on them. And I just had my house almost finished on the inside. There was work to be done inside, but it was possible to live there and do that work. And I found out the lumberyard was for sale, and I finally made a pass at them and bought the lumberyard in Toronto. In fall of 1967, we moved to Toronto. I sold the lumberyard in 1976, and I haven't worked any since then.
Well, you held some positions in Toronto.
Oh yeah, I served 2 different 4-year terms as mayor of the city during that time. Then I was on the city council, and I had this heart failure. That ended my activity there. But we lived in that house for 25 years, and Edna's health was such that, her condition was such that she wasn't able to manage upstairs to the bedrooms anymore.
Yeah.
And we moved into an apartment, sold the house the next spring. So since then, I've just been, well, since I had the heart attack, I haven't done anything, only sit around and talk.
Tell your stories.
Tell stories. I told more of my life story here this afternoon than I've ever told at one time, though.
Well, you did a good job of telling it. Some of those jobs I didn't know you'd had. You held quite a variety.
Yeah. I had a lot of experience. Yeah, I know there's several little jobs that I'd hold temporarily that were just to fill in for a short time that I don't mention. Yeah. Done a lot of things in my life.
I guess you have. Hey, tell the story about where the arrowheads all came from, Grandpa.
What?
Tell the story about the arrowheads.
From these arrowheads back here?
Yeah, up on the wall.
All right, those arrowheads were picked up by my father and mother in Arizona back in 1903 and 4, before I was born. He went down there with a brother-in-law of his on a small copper mine. And they operated the copper mine for a year, but it wasn't a very good paying proposition. They decided to close it down, and they wanted somebody as a caretaker, because they had 3 buildings, 3 houses, little bungalows. They had a big cook shack and dining hall for their help, and then another big bunkhouse for their help, and a lot of machinery and equipment there. They needed somebody to kind of keep it from walking away from them. My dad volunteered to stay there for a year for them. Of course, he's going to get paid for it. And he and Mother stayed out there by themselves. This was about 40 miles north of Williams, Arizona. At that time, it was right out in the middle of the desert. And they had a buckboard and a team. And they would get up. Mother used to laugh and tell this story about how they did. They'd get up in the morning, eat breakfast, and hook up a team and take off and be going all day wandering around over the desert. They picked up a lot of arrowheads and saw a lot of different things, went different places there. They'd stack up their dirty dishes in the big wash vat in the kitchen, and one day a week they stayed home to do the laundry and wash up their dirty dishes, clean their house. And they did that for a year, and that's when they got these arrowheads. That's where they came from.
What an adventure. I want you to tell the story, too, about how your mom came to Toronto.
Well, this is my grandmother's story that I tell. I heard her tell this several different times during my growing up years.
Now, which grandma?
My Grandma Williams.
Grandma Williams, okay.
And that's my mother's mother. I never knew my grandmother Jones or my grandfather Jones. Well, Grandma was raised in around Shell City, Missouri. Got married there. My mother was born there. And after a year or two after mother was born, I don't know just how long a time, really, they decided to come to Kansas, and they loaded up a wagon load of their belongings. They made the trip from Shell City to Toronto. He unloaded them, got them located there, and he told grandmother, he said, well, I'm going back to Shell City after the rest of our things. And he drove away. She never did see him again, never did hear from him, never heard of anything happening to him. She never did know what happened to him. She used to make a remark as she ended her story that in their traveling from Shell City to Toronto, they forded a number of rivers and streams, and then he might have got drowned in trying to ford one right over the flood stage. Well, that's a possibility, and as I got older, though, I got to reading about what had taken place in southeast Kansas along about that period of time. This would have had to have been sometime in the 1880 to 85 area, I would think. But my theory is that more than likely he was killed by somebody, so because they wanted that team and wagon. That was, at that time, a team and wagon was quite valuable.
I bet it was.
That's